And good morning, everybody. We're live. Congratulations. You made it through the week. Another week of food quality, food safety, amazing products that we all enjoy. I know I'll be going out and getting my groceries here this weekend, going out to good old Costco. So for everything that's in that store that you helped produce, thanks. And a lot of times we don't hear that. So I always want to bring that up here at the beginning of the chat that Dr. DeFeo and I, we greatly appreciate all that you do. And if nobody else says it, thanks for what you're doing out there. So if you're new to the chat, welcome. Pull up a seat. My name is Bryan Armentrout with the Food Leadership Group. And on the Food Safety Chat, every time at Friday, 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern, we live stream on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. And we bring an expert in quality and food safety and operations and other type of topics to have a discussion. And you'll notice that this is a discussion, which makes this thing so much fun in that we're not lecturing to you and we're not just we're conveying information. And what you'll find in the chat here with people like Tim, good morning, Tim, is that it's this amazing community, and food safety is not a point of competition, and we're all here to share information. So we really appreciate you taking an hour out of your week to join us. And I see people are starting to come in here. So we have Daryl, welcome. Nice to see you. And wow, it's great. So if you're not familiar, I'm always really excited when we have Joe on. He is the CEO and the head of the Juran Institute. And if you have spent more than 5 minutes working in quality assurance and process controls and these type of things, the name Juran is huge, right? And so they put together an amazing book. So essentially, I mean, it's kind of the quality Bible for the industry. And if you don't have a copy, you definitely need to get one. So with that, well, I guess, good morning, Joe. How you doing today?
Morning, Brian. Good. And welcome, everyone. I see someone out there from Nashville. You know, I just wish I was in Nashville. It's a little cold up here in Connecticut. But thank you, and I look forward to our chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's one of the things that we love to do here. And so, you know, with Tim saying he's in Nashville, we appreciate that. I'm in Colorado. And it is, let's see, what's the temperature here? It is a little above freezing. It's 35 degrees, so 2 degrees C or so for our people.
Same temperature here.
Yeah. But the big advantage out here versus you is our humidity is so much lower. So you don't get that
it's cold,
damp feeling that you
I don't know if I'm getting too old, but everywhere I go, it's cold. Everywhere I go, it's cold. I got a sweatshirt on in the house here.
What's funny is in Colorado, pretty much throughout the entire year, a lightish type jacket is all you need. You don't need a giant parka or things like this. And for the time we lived in Buffalo, oh yeah, you need all the gear.
So it contrasts that to I got married since we were together last in July, and the 15 minutes that we had our service was 109 degrees in Napa.
Wow. Nice.
And I was in the shade and my wife was in the sun for that entire 15 minutes because I had some trees behind me. So it was pretty hot. That's just a huge difference here. So,
well, congratulations.
Thanks.
And it's kind of one of those things where you're just hoping that she doesn't, faint during the ceremony from the heat, and then you end up in a viral video online.
Tapping her with a napkin so she would, not die.
Get through it. So one of the things, everybody, we love to do on the chat, good morning, Duncan and Austin, is join us for a sip of your favorite beverage. So cheers. A little water for me here today. What are you drinking, Joe?
I got a second cup of coffee.
The second one? I bought at the risk of Duncan giving me a little crap here, so bought an espresso last week, and so I've been dinking around and playing around with that. And those are pretty slick little machines. But their website and kind of their offerings goes too far, right? It's kind of like when you go to Cheesecake Factory and you have 900 pages that you can choose from, so you can't choose anything. With those guys, they've got, multitude of varieties of different machines, and then you got all different types of coffee pods and all this type of crap. It really kind of clouds your decision-making judgment. They would probably be better off limiting it.
I have an espresso machine, and I've got 85 different types of espresso, and I only grew up on one espresso.
Yeah, espresso was espresso. So for our chat here today, and this is going to be a fun one, guys. You're going to enjoy this. Is Joe put out a couple of articles on LinkedIn around is quality dead? And with that, you got quite a bit of feedback on that, some good, some bad, which is fine, right? You know you're over the target if you're getting flack. So I always kind of look at it as good if you're doing that. But really, that kind of jump started what we were talking about here today. And in there, what kicked us off for you was a comment that came from John Foster, where he was really talking about quality management systems and how these things work. And there was a little bit in there that caught my attention, where he said we need to systematically integrate quality into all aspects of a organization's operations. And I was like, oh, right. And yeah. So, and that kind of resonated with you too, didn't it?
Yeah. And we're the whole thing about what Juran brought to the quality management arena in his early days was that quality was about quality and control because of World War II and the government contracts. And the government was saying, you need to assure us that these military goods you're shipping us or whatever are going to work. And so we grew up on a mentality of control, and control the product. But then, the Jurans and the Demings came along and said, you got to think broader. So we always think about Big Q, which is enterprise system-wide quality management and management of quality rather than just a quality management system. And so, and John's a big follower and writer, and it stuck with us because that was kind of the point of my facetious article about quality is dead, was that the acronym DEAD was not a negative at all. But I was trying to convey that it's so hard, even after my 35 years in this, so hard to get non-quality people to understand quality outside of production as an issue. That it's the quality of goods and services and processes in all functions. And because the customer today is not just the mom and pop who go to the mom and pop supermarket, a little grocery store and pick up stuff and talk to the person, they can access the suppliers of the product today. They can access anybody. So you've got to have mechanisms across the organization that are continuously improving that. So system-wide is the way to think. And we're trying to make the point that maybe the word quality isn't the right word because people in production get it, but people outside don't. So maybe it's excellence. Maybe it's something else. And that was the whole point of the article. And you saw the comments. Some are just right and left and in the middle.
Getting hit on all sides. Yeah. So with that, an acronym. Yeah. So for DEAD, it stands for driving, right? A deliberate approach on what you're trying to do. Exceptional. And I like what you had written in here as well. Ordinary results are going to yield ordinary efforts, right? Ordinary efforts equal ordinary results. And yeah, if you don't put out the effort, you're not going to get the output that you need. In order to do that, you have to achieve, right? You have to have hard work and dedication associated with that. And then you have to be consistent in that. And really, as I was kind of thinking about this, preparing for our chat, kind of this overlap into what you're saying here applies to different areas in our personal lives too. So, the beginning of the new year, and everybody puts their resolutions together, it's like, hey, I'm gonna lose a little weight, or I'm gonna start going to the gym more and stuff like that. And everything that you listed here applies to that as well, right? So it's like, okay, I'm going to go to the gym every day. I'm going to put together a plan on how I'm going to tackle this. I'm going to put together a system. I'm going to put in extraordinary effort in order to reach this goal. And I'm going to be very deliberate in my approach, right? You can apply this approach to many different aspects in your life.
And, you mentioned Dunkin' Donuts this morning. And so we went out and picked up our Dunkin' for our daughter in the morning. And my wife evidently knows the lady, and I was at the driver's side. So when I got up to the window, she recognized her and said, "Oh, that's why the order was different." But I said, "What's going on here? Your donuts are getting smaller, and the price is staying the same."
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "Well, they keep doing that, and our customers keep complaining." And I want to use that as an example. Does she have a voice back to her manager and the manager back to Dunkin'? Because I imagine that's a common comment. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we mean by everybody system-wide has a voice to get back to say, hey, is there merit here? Is it getting too small, the donut? Is it just this store? Is it all stores? Did I happen to have a bad donut? So that's what we mean by everybody everywhere.
Yeah, that shrinkflation. I think with consumers, right? I know as a consumer, you feel like you're being cheated, right? It's like, hey, they're trying to pull a fast one on me. At least be honest about it. I know my wife is very ticked off similar to your donut story. So there's a shampoo she buys at the store, and she went and bought a new one, and she still had the old one at home in the shower, and very different size and higher. I think it was the same price, but yeah, if I bring that up to her, she's still pissed off about that.
The fast food sodas, the fast food, they got a lot of flack for such big supersized, sodas. But now I notice that the medium is a small and the large is a medium, and but the price is the same. So I think they're willing to accept customer dissatisfaction to a point to shift the paradigm. We can make more money, but it's the voice of the customer has to be heard throughout the organization. So if wherever you sit, and I think right the first time is another phrase which is pretty good, because it does help people understand we're trying to do right the first time at any job, assuming you know what right means. And so it's just like our definition that, if you want a definition of quality, just think about every output of our job, no matter whether we're in finance or human resources or in quality or in food safety or in production, the output has to meet someone's, fitness for purpose. So, is my raw material and food supplies fit for your purpose in making your product? Is my output by spreadsheets with all that analysis good and fit for your purpose? And so if you start getting people thinking fit for purpose, then the next question is, well, what is its purpose? And is it meeting the needs? And try to, it's so hard, because everybody believes, you'll see so many articles and so many people saying quality is everyone's responsibility. Well, it is. And so is safety. Safety is everyone, but I'm not responsible for cleaning the aisles. I'm not responsible for building the facility. So I can get hurt even though I'm responsible. The same thing with quality. I'm responsible for quality, but I can't control the equipment I buy. I can't control the slowness of the customers, my internal customers. So we're stuck trying to improve quality because we can't control all aspects of it. So the leadership and resources have to be put towards that. And if you don't put it towards that, you don't get better. Think about, I don't know I know I see people down in Nashville there, but people play golf or do a sport or pickleball now. You're going to get to a point where you're good, but if you want to be great, you've got to invest some resources. You got to take lessons. You got to practice more. You got to spend more time. You got to spend more money. And so you've got to do that. And the same thing goes for, quality is not everyone's responsibility if you don't have everyone having those resources.
Yeah. And I love what you said a little bit ago relative to this, right? Right for who? And this is something I constantly rail over, is when we're designing a new product or these type of things, there's so many people involved with it, and they all have their different perspective on what it should be. And that's nice, but that doesn't really matter, right? It all comes back to that consumer in the marketplace. And what do you want? And then how do we measure that internally? And so for me, one of the key examples that I always look at is technical analysis of product. Okay, great. We know the pH, we know the total solids, we know the color, all of these type of attributes that we can measure with that product. The consumer doesn't care about any of that stuff. I've never, in my 20 plus years, managing quality, I've never had a consumer come back to me and say, hey, I bought this beverage from you, and I think the pH is slightly low. No, they're going to come back to me and say, hey, this tastes like crap. What's wrong with this product? Because they have this expectation. And so I think sometimes, Joe, we get so involved in our own internal navel gazing associated with these technical aspects that we forget. So when you're looking at beverages, right, taste and texture and these type of things are what the consumer are looking at, and you have to control those things vigorously. And the best way to do that, to your point, is that consumer feedback, because they've got this internal benchmark of, just like our beverages, right, of what it is that we expect it to be. And if it deviates from that, man, we have a problem. But unfortunately, as we all know, a very small percentage of people actually take the time to complain. I mean, they're just going to switch.
And the reality is, if you're in the business of satisfying a large variable customer base, because there's so many different sensory tastes out there today, and we want to satisfy them, then you've got to do that. You can't just pick and choose. But if you decide, these are our 3 brands, this is what we're going to do, then people get accustomed to that. And I feel bad for, many not just in food and beverage, but many industries, they try to customize so much that they can't manage that supply chain well, and you can't get good at everything. And growing up, I remember when Fanta soda came on the market. Coke was there, but I remember, a orange soda here on the East Coast came out of a machine, or Sprite was new, right? We only had 2 or 3 options. How many options we have now for a beverage today? So as a consumer, you're bouncing around, or you're finding one you like, and you're hoping it even stays the same long enough, till you get accustomed to it. But trying to satisfy, so the fitness for purpose means, it used to be fitness for use. Who's the user? The user is so broad, and these companies have to manage that or decide they don't want those customers. And so we see proliferation of supply chain after supply chain of these products. And that makes it harder and harder to manage the quality of it, and also to keep the cost down, because now your volumes are down across various types of product.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a previous company that I worked for, and we did a survey of our supply chain. So this was a large dairy conglomerate, and they would buy mom and pop dairies and integrate them into the system, and essentially they would just leave it alone and say, okay, start sending us the money now. We went and did a survey of all the raw materials that we were purchasing within the company, and we had over 6,000 SKUs of different materials that were purchased for production. In that, and the head of R&D, her brain just about popped out of her head when we told her this. There was 24 different varieties of strawberry flavor for yogurt. How do you manage that?
With only 10 varieties of strawberries.
Yeah, just the army of people that you would need to manage that and make sure the suppliers are complying and everything else. Impossible task. And so luckily,
I'll contrast. We were talking about fast food. I had my first cherry pie from McDonald's in years. It was still really hot, and it tasted the same. and I thought about it. I think I've only seen apple and cherry pies at McDonald's, right? They didn't go into 85 brands. So if you stick to something long enough, people are going to keep coming back for it. And I think that's the thing with the yogurts. I mean, geez, my God, go through the aisles. So unfortunately, and then here's the other thing. When you have such a diverse customer base and diverse product base, it's very hard to have non-production people understand who the customer is.
Yeah.
Because if I'm working in accounting or in finance or in HR outside of the realm of production or marketing, where they might have good knowledge of who the customer is, I'm going to think the customer is like me, because I go into the store and I buy this stuff. And so I think like me, when in fact, I'm not a good sample of what your customer base is. And so they don't have a really good appreciation. So when you think about system-wide quality and company-wide quality management and company-wide quality thinking, the best thing the leadership can do is constantly communicate who the customer is and what they really want, because that allows us to connect our job to that. The production people get that through a recipe. That's the recipe. And the supply chain people get it through the delivery dates. And, the marketing people get it instead of saying, we got to go train everybody on all these great tools, the best thing they can do is communicate who the customers are, what they want, what they like, what they don't like, and let that transfer through the system. And it's a simpler thing to do than teaching them, how to do all the quality management tools,
right?
How to fix things after the fact.
Yeah, and then they don't even necessarily need to do that. I mean, so for example, and it kind of brings up the main point of our discussion here is, what does quality mean to these different groups in the organization? So if I'm working in procurement, quality to me means exactly what you just said, right? So the shipments are arriving on time to the plant. There's no damage. It's within specification. I'm doing my job.
And if you're a buyer, it's try to get the lowest price for the best possible goodness.
Yeah.
And unless, they know that, so they're going to always look for price for the best option. But that's what their customer wants, which is the business, right? So everybody's got to look at who's their real customer and how do they satisfy them.
Right, linking that back.
There's a comment over here that there was a couple of 1,000 strawberry flavorings in the books. That's thanks, Duncan. Duncan, we were talking about you own the donut company.
Come on, Duncan, get those donuts bigger. Yeah. What are you doing?
Well, that's the other thing too. Just flavors. If you're like an international flavor company, just think the amount of flavors you have. There's not that many. I don't think there's that many spices in the world. We get great flavors. Then we see the opposite happen. We need to simplify our supply chain. We need to simplify our portfolio. We want to cut back our SKUs. And now we're deciding that we're going to get rid of some customers because that's what you do. And outside of supply chain, nobody, production can't say, my God, we have to turn over another line now. We're going to shut down for 3 days while we turn over the peanut butter line and go to, the almond butter line. And there's so many turnovers. So the effect of all that is operationally a nightmare.
Yeah, and that's the constant, right? You got this tension between, the marketing group and the operational group. The plant manager wants to make the same product all day long. That's efficient. He doesn't have to have line changeovers. Or he's going to have less mistakes. Great, life is good. I can make this product efficiently and at a good price. That's not the goal of marketing, right? Marketing, as you pointed out, they want differentiation. They want different product varieties. They want different branding information they can put on, single source vanilla from Madagascar or whatever. And, hey, let's launch an organic product. Okay, well, shit, now we have to run organic product at the beginning of the run and then do a changeover. Hey, let's start adding some products. Let's do a almond milk product. Oh, great. Now we're introducing a new allergen into the plant. And one of the things when I work with the marketing teams, when they're coming up with all these different things, is what you guys need to understand is for everything that you put in from a new complexity standpoint, that's not additive. That's a multiplicative change. You're increasing the complexity by factors of 10 every time you do that because it impacts everything else. So you may not see that, but you're really putting the products at risk and making our chances of producing it correctly go down that much more.
So I'm going to jump to a point you and I were talking about. So when you think that quality is everyone's responsibility and we have all this complexity, do we need a quality department?
Yeah.
And there's a camp out there that says, well, if you get quality right the first time, you don't need that. And we'll give you this example. Yes, you need a quality department, same way you need a safety department, same way you need an accounting department, because there is a role to play of oversight. There is a role to play to make sure we manage that complexity objectively. And it may not have to be a big department, but there's a task there that has to be done. And people believe, and I don't want to use a big name like that, but many organizations, even the quality experts who didn't really learn quality, says they appease the leadership by saying, yeah, we can cut back. So I do one of two things. I say, okay, send all your quality department home for a week. Just send them home and see what happens. And what will happen is everything will degrade because the things they were doing help maintain production quality or some other fashion of quality. And due to complexity, due to technology, the quality function is basically, and this is an old Juran story, life behind the quality dam. The dams we have holding back water for reservoirs are there for a reason. And if the dam is technology today, there's always going to be a technology failure. So we stick our finger in a dam to plug up the hole. And the quality department is that finger in the dam plugging up the hole because we can't plan perfectly. We don't know all the customer needs. We don't know perfect supply chains. We get disruption. So who's going to do that? And so the quality department versus the quality function. In other words, every one of us play a quality function. We try to do the best job we can with the resources and materials we have in our job. But the quality department has an additional function of oversight, assurance, and in your industry, regulatory and compliance. You like it or not, who's going to do it in production if someone's not doing that, right?
Right.
And the same thing, we talk about this with finance. If you're in the financial department, you have regulatory requirements and SEC laws you have to abide by. And, the salespeople and the marketing people, they're not going to do that. So, but the question remains is, how big a department and what kind of influence. And here's been the real problem. As you expand your thinking about quality management across functions, it changes from production, quality control, and quality assurance to pure quality improvement, continuous improvement. So you do see a lot of, Lean Six Sigma activity outside of production, but they lose the focus, and it's on cost reduction, non-value added removal, cost reduction. And this is where, we're at odds with folks. And I encourage you to go to our website. We just kind of finally revamped words and everything to try to get back to some clarity. But this is the way you think about it, that, to manage quality enterprise-wide, we used what Juran called the Juran trilogy. You design quality into your goods and services. Then you maintain control of the quality through your process management, process control, process insurance. And then you continuously improve on that to be able to optimize and seek continuous value when things keep changing, because consumer needs keep changing. So instead of saying, okay, every department must plan, control, and improve, which is the ideal, it's turning out to be production, QC, QA, pure little bit of improvement, but it's all about let's reduce, not improve quality. Outside is let's design product into our design quality in based on customer needs and meet their needs. So there's some design quality, which is incorporated in a lot of new designs. But the improvement is very heavy weighted towards cost reduction versus quality enhancement. So if I said I'm in accounting and I bill my suppliers, poorly because it takes too long to get the bill to them, and then we force them to pay on time, that's not good quality. From the supplier's eyes, it's not good quality. So if I want to improve quality, I would understand what that supplier needs, what our business needs, and we make a process to meet that. Instead, we try to reduce the cost of invoicing them. We wait too long, and we don't give them enough time because we want the money in, and that's bad quality. So what you have to, continuous improvement is not just continuously cost reduction, it's continuously enhancing quality, which also reduces cost, because the negative aspect of poor quality is waste and rework and dissatisfaction. So the application and the trilogy is a circle. So you plan, control, improve. And anything you learn from improvement, you feed back the planning. So if I'm in that supplier paying thing, I could next year, let's plan to have a better service than we did this year, right? Let's, plan, that's the key. Plan it back in instead of just doing improvement for cost reduction. So you got enterprise, system-wide planning, control, and improvement.
I love where you're going with that. So I had a CEO at a previous company that I worked for, and he had a great saying in the organization. It was nice and simple, easy to remember. It was like, be easy to do business with. And he applied that to all the different departments in the company. So to your point, Joe, okay, we have suppliers and they're our partners. If we're constantly trying to screw them over on price and we're not paying them on time and we make them jump through all these different hoops to work with us, that bad taste is going to stay there. And they may not be able to do anything currently, but at some point in the future, that's going to come back and bite us. And put together processes and systems that make it easy to do business with us and a pleasure to do business with us. And
that's a choice. You see, that's a choice.
Yeah.
That's a choice an organization makes. And this is the problem with quality, is everyone's responsibility, and quality is important because we talk about the house of quality, which is the infrastructure you need in an organization to think enterprise wide. But the base of that, the foundation, is a decision that we want a strategy based on quality,
right,
versus a strategy based on profitability without quality, meaning we'll do okay, but not based on it. Without that fundamental choice, everything else is relative. So so organizations that say, I want to have a better culture, I want to have an improvement culture, I want to have an excellence culture, I want to have a quality culture, and they're over here and they don't have that, the first thing they got to do is leadership has to make a choice. We want to do that because you don't have to do that to make money. But you do have to do that to make a lot of money over a lot of time. And the good in the organizations that grasp that. Amazon doesn't get enough credit for how they deliver customer service, but it's not just about products showing up on time. They have a lot of great contact, ability to like, for instance, one of the biggest complaints that people used to have when buying anything online was the ability to return it.
Mhm.
right? And how many things are accumulating in your house waiting to be returned? And they tackled that because they knew that was an issue that they couldn't just grow exponentially by making overnight shipments. People don't like some things, they got to send it back. Where you walk to a store, you hand it in. So they made it easy to access that. They
Mhm.
also made it easy to leave your house with a label to access that. And we don't think about that. And Amazon doesn't get enough credit for some of the customer service stuff they do, but they're what, the biggest retail, I think, in the United States now, I
Yeah,
imagine.
I would
Uh,
imagine so too.
and their quality management system plans, controls, and continuously improves, because I read a study about them. And your point about suppliers and customers. Years ago, I was at IBM, and if people remember who IBM was, we looked up to IBM like you look up to Apple and
Yeah, Big
Amazon
Blue.
today. But I had this exercise of leadership on two sides of the paper. One side said, I'm a customer. What do you demand of your suppliers? And on the other side said, I'm a supplier. What do you demand of your customers? And they got the point when they were done answering the questions, the exact same thing. And
Right.
then so they said, okay, so we got to treat our suppliers like customers, and our customers should get the same. And so that's, when you think about quality, you have to treat your suppliers as a customer, because they supply you with information
Mhm.
and material that help your business, and you have to supply them with information. And so the supply chain isn't just about us versus them, it's us together. And so someone had a comment here about, I think it was about quality management, quality assurance, and business functions, and we're still describing it in quality terms. Uh, the Japanese weren't good at just building cars. Matter of fact, they were not very good at building cars, but they got good at building cars. And they didn't fight the word quality. They didn't add the word excellence. They didn't even add the words Lean Six Sigma. Those weren't their words. And if you go there today, they will talk about quality, 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 quality. They don't fight it. They don't try to change it. Why? Because that's what the customer talks about.
Mhm.
When you talk to your customers, they never use the word excellence. They never use the word meet my requirements. They never say meet my needs. They just say quality. So
Yeah.
everybody's so hung up on, that's why my article was about, is quality dead? And the answer is no, because the customer still uses it all the time. Look at
Yeah.
Boeing right now. What is Boeing getting beat up for? Quality.
Yeah.
But we don't know what's wrong. We don't know why it's wrong, but we know that the customer, the Alaska Airlines, and then other airline companies, and the people on those planes said the quality was bad. They didn't say they had no excellence. They didn't say they had bad systems. They said quality. So as long as we have consumers using the word quality, that's what we need to use. But internally, I find so many organizations now people don't want to use the word Six Sigma, and rightly so. It's kind of a funky word, doesn't mean much. But the point of Six Sigma was a measure of quality at a very high level of perfection. And so for a while I was like, oh, let's use Six Sigma. Now that I don't want to use Six Sigma. This new community doesn't really like it, the new. But we tend to fight these words, not instead of sticking to them. That's why the Japanese, although their economy goes up and down, that's more of their government, but their products still do really well in the areas they're really good at, and they just don't change the definition.
Yeah. And I think part of this, and this is something that I always link to with my quality teams, is I think part of what we're doing in quality, especially on the food safety side of things, is we're performing a moral function within a company. And how many other departments are doing that? We're really one of those groups that are looking at these type of attributes and saying, to your point, Joe, is what we're doing right? And what does right mean? How do we know it's right? Are we protecting the health of our consumers? Are we making sure that we're not going to make them sick? And what are the things that are coming up out there that we need to be aware of, that we need to counteract before it even happens? And other departments aren't looking at things that way. So if we can help them, to your point, with the suppliers and everything else, understand that they also have a moral duty associated with their role, right? We're all people. And we all understand what's good and bad relative to these type of things. And incorporating that in versus, I'm just doing my job and this is what my job description does and this is how I get my raise. You're stuck, right? You can't get to that quality point where you're looking at these things. And all of these departments and companies have an impact on this. To your point, finance, procurement, operations, legal. Oh my goodness, legal, right? And the better that the senior leadership team understands this. And quality is one of those few groups in the company, right? We get to play in all types of different areas. And we have a responsibility to help bring that to those groups as well.
You got some really good comments, really smart people out there.
I do.
Some of the comments that just feed off of what we're talking about here. The problem is, and this is, I don't know how many of them are in leadership, but the people that tend to sit through these things are the gatekeepers, meaning they listen and they go back and they try to affect everyone else. And the advice I give you all is you've got to be a voice of quality, just like you got to be a voice of integrity. You got to be a voice for safety within your organization. And what happens is that if that voice is too strong and too out of sync with what leadership wants, they shut up. Just like our society, we don't say, don't call the police when we see something happen because we're afraid to get involved. But when it comes to being the voice of quality, if you talk, this is what our customers want, this is what our customers expect, this is what my requirements say we have to do, then why aren't you letting me do that? But if you stop talking and being the voice, then you're going to lose leadership looking for, because here's one thing I learned. The top leader is always the one, he or she wants the best quality. They really do. But they usually leave it up to the next tier to make a decision. And that next tier is usually at odds with that top dog. So I know for a fact, and we gave a Juran medal to a past CEO of Boeing because of the goodness what they were doing. And I do believe that the CEOs know what they're doing. But the question then is, what happens? Why? And I don't want to estimate, but more than likely, there's a conflict between either there was we think about people you talk about people make errors, people make mistakes. So there's inadvertent errors, there's willful errors, and there are technique errors, meaning if those bolts were left off because someone had a bad day, they were technique wise, they didn't do a good job, well, there should be a check and balance for that. If it was a inadvertent error, there should be systems in place to prevent us from making too many bad inadvertent errors. And if it was a willful error, you would think fire that person. But no, willful errors typically happen because someone's pressured to do something faster, cheaper, so that we can get it out. And so many times that when you investigate these problems, you're going to talk to the people and say, they're pushing so hard to meet the shipment dates or pushing so hard to get this out that I didn't think it was, the pain for shipping it was greater, it was less than the pain for not shipping it. And so even willful errors. So you have to look and say, okay, those leaderships are at odds with each other because we have to ship, we have to put regulatory, we have to get that customer happy. And so there's a lot of conflict, and it takes a lot of real guts to say, no, let's make sure we got it right. So if that quality department is shrinking and there's less eyes, well, the risk is now high. And risk management is in vogue, but is risk management, where was it at Boeing if that guy, so something was wrong, obviously something was wrong, or something very unique happened, but I'm going to guess just more of the same. But if we don't be a voice internally, if you don't stand up, then no one's going to be speaking about quality. And guys like us have been doing this for 35, 40 years, and Juran did it for 80. And the last point I want to say is that unless CEOs are on this list, the people that are on here don't have much effect other than being a voice.
Right. And yeah, the fastest way to kill your quality career is to be inconsistent, right? So you set up rules and you have different things that the company stands for, what have you. And then an exception comes along. It's like, to your point, Joe, oh, geez, we really need to make this shipment on time. Why can't we just ship it? It'll be, and if the quality department goes, yeah, okay, we'll let this go this time, you're done, right? That becomes that new standard, right? And everything lowers.
Yeah, the
And
material review board concept is, how close to the spec are we? And here's what happens is that we look at this batch, this product palette, and says, okay, it's on the edge. It's okay. Let's ship it. But what we didn't look at is the last 10 batches. Are they moving to the edge?
Mm-hmm.
And we got to move it back? And so they look independently at that. Quality's function should be, hey guys, this is the 10th one that is so close to the edge of that spec that we can ship this one, but pretty soon we're over the spec. We're going to either be too salty, or the customer is just going to say it tastes horrible, and that's usually what happens. We tend not to move towards the end of the spec when it comes to safety, right? You don't say, oh, we got a little bit of germ, we got a little bit of allergen.
Yeah.
No, we're really tight on that. But usually when it comes to the flavors and the ingredients, they push these specs. I'll give you a quick example. Tomato sauce manufacturing, customers were complaining that the sauce was too watery.
Mm-hmm.
And right away, the company that made it would complain of, it's not watery. But when you examined and they found, yes, it was too watery. Why is it watery? Well, the natural theory is that tomatoes were, overripe when they were put in a jar. Well, the reality was they were adding non-tomatoes to the jars to save on cost. They
Mm-hmm.
put more ingredients and less tomato. Well, that all just kind of made it soupy. Until they reversed that, they didn't get rid of the problem. And so you get to a point where your spec limits are being pushed for things you didn't even measure.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it's customer satisfaction on that sauce has to be a certain way.
Well, and this gets back to your point earlier of the focus on cost reduction, right? It's like, okay, we're going to, that's an easy way to do it. Okay, we'll buy cheaper ingredients. We'll modify the formula. And then eventually it gets to a point where the consumer tastes it and says, what is this crap, right? My wife used to buy a particular brand of picante sauce, same thing, right? Which prided itself on being made in Texas and authentic and not this New York stuff. And it got to the point where you buy it now and it's so watery and runny, you're just like, she won't even consider purchasing that product anymore.
So we posted a quality minute the other day called the Museum of Failed Products. And the Museum of Failed Products is basically, walk down an aisle and see the product that doesn't sell and then they get rid of it. But there's one product in there was black licorice toothpaste. And it was, they were trying to appeal to people to brush their teeth, and it was black licorice toothpaste. Now, what's wrong with black licorice toothpaste? Nothing, except it makes your teeth look black if you don't clean them right. And so it didn't do well. Well, how did you allow black licorice toothpaste to get out? More than likely, it was either a kind of a unique kind of one-time thing, or the sample size they tested in was totally unreliable. And this is what happens in the marketing side. This is where quality gets built in. The marketing, the research, they don't sample enough of the sensory, possibly with enough broad variety of folks, right? We have a big variety. They have a limited sample. It would be like today, assuming that the person who buys the groceries is a woman. It's just not the case. It's, so you better include the typical buyer. And not only that, the one buying it may not even be the one cooking it and eating it. So now you got three different customers there. So when you think about how do I build quality in, well, you have proper sampling, proper focus groups, and enough of them that says there's validity to this taste. There's validity to the black licorice, toothpaste.
Well, and it's also understanding that people lie, right? So when you're talking with consumers, it's like, okay, Mr. Armentrout, we're doing this study on preferences and things. We like to gather some information. Sure. Do you eat healthy? Oh, 100%. Do you exercise? I exercise every single day. Do you drink alcohol? Well, occasionally I may have a glass of wine once or twice a year. Total bullshit. right? And if you think that that is how people actually behave, right? It's like when you go to the doctor and you say that same thing, the doctor's going to look at you and go, all right, now really, okay, okay, I don't really exercise that much, and I may have a couple more drinks than I just said, right? And so doctors will automatically assume that you're lying on those type of things because you're embarrassed, right? You want to say that you're doing all these things when you really don't.
And the data will show otherwise. So
Yeah.
the best form of understanding customer needs is never asking them. It's observing them. And this is where this is where this whole concept of big data and the amount of data that's pulling in, and people are using this big data to interpret customer needs, but the data they may be using are lies. You just say that because I fill out a form and I'm going to lie. So the best form of customer need understanding is observation.
Mhm.
And so I'll give you an example. My wife had gone she knew she was going to a research place for a focus group. It was in one of the malls, and they pay you to go. And she went in and she sat. And after a while, they said, thank you, and sent her home. And I said, what do you mean? He said, yeah. She said, we were sitting there and we were drinking the coffee and we were talking, and we got talking about the coffee and how the coffee was good. And someone said, well, my coffee wasn't good. Come to find out, they were being observed on the taste of the coffee. And there was a person in there who was planted to prompt questions about the product.
Beautiful.
They were still in the waiting room, waiting to go into the focus group. That was the focus group. And I loved it because it was like, yeah, because there's no bias, right? There's no bias. You could say that bias was the person that was planted, but observation. So Ford years ago said that they had this it was the Ford Taurus had just come out. And they said, this is a great car. And they brought it to a Ford, this is a written up story. They brought it to a dealership, and this old lady came in and said, let me open the hood. She tried to open the hood. She says, I can't lift this hood. He says, when you can get this car to lift the hood so I can change the oil, I'll buy it. And so they watched and observed this lady who couldn't open the hood. And they said, how could we possibly maintain the car if we can't open the hood? Even her. So they changed it so they could lift the hood very lightly. That changed all cars. You lift the hood high. The other part was, I can't get at the oil filter. Mm-hmm. Now, today, people don't have to worry about that because they don't change oil filters. But the point was, they observed it. They let them go in and touch the car, play with the car. It's the only way you can get a true need of the customer because they're unbiased. Mm-hmm. Supermarkets, I know there's a lot of companies where people touch, they monitor where they touch and don't grab. Well, they interpret that as a choice the customer has. In some cases it is, but sometimes I'm trying to look for the box behind it. It's in the back there. So observation of consumer behavior is still going to be the best way, but it's costly, and you got to spend the time. So we shortchange that.
Yeah, one of the best tools I had in the past is we had a quality questionnaire that we inserted in our cheese product, and so it was a brie, right? So you have these little boxes that you would put this in. And the questionnaire was brilliantly designed by the head of quality in France. And he came and flew over and worked with me and spent a week explaining this survey and how it was developed and how the questions were written. And the only things on this survey, Joe, were quality questions. And it's like, thank you for buying this brie from us. And so we self-selected for customers. And you say, okay, what's the date written on the side of the box? When did you first take a bite of this cheese? And then everything was divided up into 3 choices. Do you find the rind of the brie too white, just right, or too brown? And so we would go through that. And then at the end, we had verbatims where people could comment. That was an amazing quality tool for me because now I had the average age of consumption in the marketplace. I had, the remaining shelf life left. I had the key defects that the consumers cared about. And whenever sales would come back and say, right, to the cost thing, hey, Bryan, we're seeing lots of spoils in the market because of the shelf life. If you give me 5 more days of shelf life, this product will be fine. We won't lose a lot of money. I would pull out those graphs and say, okay, here's our rating for our product. Here's how it drops off a cliff at the end of shelf life. Everything that you're seeing here complaint rated, we are going to get absolutely hammered by our consumers in the marketplace. And the sales guy would be, oh, okay, I got you. Fantastic tool for getting feedback.
It's interesting you say about that cheese is that the wine industry in the United States, I'm going to break it into two parts: the mass producers and the local producers. The mass producers are driving the price of wine down, and they're doing that because the majority of wine consumed by the average household is being bought in a supermarket now.
Mm-hmm.
And the supermarkets are price conscious, so they're pushing price down. Well, how do you think a wine manufacturer is going to drop the price of wine versus the private, the good stuff? Well, it's the cost of grapes and the quality of the grape. And so if you buy cheap grapes, old grapes, you're going to get cheaper wine. And if you don't let that wine sit long enough, it's going to be a much less flavored wine. But that's what's happening. And so eventually, so they made a decision that the consumer wants a sweet wine that is of poor quality for $9.99, not a decent wine for $19.99. And but I think you're going to see at some point is that you're going to lose consumers because the wine is now going to go the way that tomato sauce did.
Yeah. It's being commoditized.
Yeah.
And people no longer have the patience to cellar their wine or the space or the resources, right? So the idea, and the wine industry is definitely seeing this, is the idea of taking a wine and laying it down and coming back in 5 or 10 years to drink it. Not many people are doing that.
Yeah. Someone had a comment here about no company director would ever want to introduce contaminated product onto the market, which is true. I think when it comes to safety, but given the pressures, they may not, and given the lack of, good, clear commands or good, clear decision-making criteria, it could happen. What is indiscriminate? What is marginal? We see it all the time. That Boeing thing, if it ever came down to it, they thought it was okay. Maybe they thought it was right.
Yeah. And the phrase I always watch out for that is if someone tells me, we're talking about a quality issue or things like this, and they say, well, yeah, Bryan, I kind of hear what you're saying, but we've never really had a problem before. Right. It's like, oh, that's a massive assumption. What makes you think in the future that this trend isn't going to continue? Your point back to those 10 consecutive lots that are pushing the spec. Just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean it won't happen. And people have a hard time with that concept.
Yeah. And then, the other thing too is the food industry doesn't sell their product outside the factory doors. They sell it through distributors, supermarkets, and grocery stores. And you're at the mercy of them too, to give feedback and pull product when it's not good and not questionable. But sometimes the supermarket can really hurt you. So I don't know if you've followed the story recently about Stu Leonard's here in Connecticut. Stu Leonard's is a very famous, unique supermarket. It's on the East Coast now. It was based in Norwalk, Connecticut, and it had a unique flow. It was a singular flow. It had fun things for parents. It just classic, great thing. And instead of selling the average 10,000 products, they sold 1,500. They had their own milk making and everything. Very famous. Well, and they have their own brand and they make great product. Well, a person had died around Thanksgiving from a peanut allergy in a product that had no labeling of peanuts on it. And immediately the response was, we bought this from a third party. They didn't notify us. And then the supplier came in and said, we notified them that this was made in a factory with peanuts, and the Stu Leonard's label went on it without that. So here you have a food manufacturer possibly, I don't know for sure, just reading what this is just public in the paper, that did the right thing, notifying them that there was peanuts in it. Somehow that got missed on the label, which was repackaged, sold, someone died. And although those are rare, they're not as rare as people would think.
Yeah.
But who's going to get blamed? The food manufacturer.
Right.
And so who's going to get blamed for Boeing? The supplier. The supplier did. And they already talked about the supplier being, I think a Asian company of some sort being blamed for that. And it's like, see, this is the other thing. If you blame your supplier because the cockpit doesn't work, or if you blame your supplier because the door doesn't work, or if you blame your supplier because they were supposed to let us know, that's not helping the problem, because you are the face of the product. Stu Leonard's is the face. Their name was on the product. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
eventually the suppliers don't want to do work with you.
Yeah, and then you're hard to deal with.
No, and
Yeah,
a mistake could have been made, an error could be made, but the first thing was supplier, supplier, supplier. That's just deflection, deflection, deflection.
yeah, absolutely. It's not. Yeah, it's the Boeing 737 Max.
Here's one too.
That's it.
This is what I tell everybody on the line here. If anybody questions why you demand good quality, why you're asking for better quality, ask them, and I'll put it in Boeing term. Hey, Boeing, apply the stringent standards for quality that you require everybody under you to do. The suppliers out there are constantly, see the defense and aerospace constantly dealing with Boeing-like requirements for over analysis, over these things, and not applying it to themselves, obviously. So can we apply to us what we're asking everyone else to do?
Yeah, exactly.
Usually we're pretty tough on everybody else, not tough on ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. And it's taking the time to get to root cause. Why did that actually happen? The example from the food industry we were talking about is metal detectors, right? If your metal detector is tripping, there's a reason metal is being produced. Why? Why is that? The answer is not to just inspect out the product that's got the defect. Why is the defect happening in the first place? And getting to root cause is hard, right? It's a lot of work to try and figure that out. And companies
there's a lot of moving parts in a food factory,
Yeah.
And the other thing too, this is a really good example. With the best intentions, metal still gets out into the place. Now, why? Well, it's not just the metal going in, it's the quantity of metal and the size of metal and the ability to detect it. And the detection equipment may be not calibrated, maybe not maintained, maybe not even calibrated properly for a given shift.
Yeah.
And so when you look at why do we have a quality department? For that reason, to maintain the effectiveness of our test equipment. Because think about the variation in test equipment for that little amount of metal detection. Now we're seeing a lot of plastic. The big deal now is plastic, which is going to be a bigger challenge for food industry to challenge how much plastic is going into our the product when it leaves. But there's no amount of money that's going to fix the elimination of metal, but not trying to continuously improve on it is bad.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, we're wow, the hour flew here, Joe. So we're just about out of time. So with our topic today, right, we've talked about a wide range of different things and a lot of abstract ideas and things like that of how we can use what we know to help improve companies. Any good closing thoughts or ideas for people that you'd like to leave them with today?
Well, I like the ones that are here and then the ones that might be coming in. Leadership has a lot of choices, and they're hearing from a lot of people about what to do regarding quality and quality management. There's going to be the quality system people in their ears saying we need to do ISO 9000, QS 9000, AS 9000. We need to do that standardization system stuff. And that's an ear. Then another ear says, we got to just do continuous improvement using Lean and Six Sigma. Matter of fact, let's do more Lean and Six Sigma. And then there's folks like us who are trying to say, why don't you learn what the bases are and pick what you need for your customer and your brand and that. And so all I could say is that a little education goes a long way to find out who really knows something about your industry, who really knows something about quality in that regard, because I've seen so many, particularly food, they put the ISO banner up and then they have an ISO department and a quality department. And I'm like, wait a minute. Why? We have to maintain the standard. No, if you do the quality system right, the standard gets maintained. So it's a different thing in that organization. And so leadership doesn't know. So the recommend, reach out and look at the, if you're a gatekeeper or you're in the quality department, educate yourself, educate people around you on what really is right and not right. And I would welcome you to come to our website and read some of the articles that go back and with evidence. And I also said, if anybody here wants a copy of the handbook and they send me an email, I'll be happy to send them a PDF.
Nice.
I'm in the process of writing the the 8th edition, and there's going to be a whole chapter on. They haven't had a chapter on food and beverage quality in years, so I'm looking to hear from people like that. So,
oh, fantastic! That is great. Good to hear.
yeah.
So with that, and so I want to recognize this as well here, Joe. Fantastic participation here, guys. We may not have mentioned your comment specifically when we were talking here, but as you can see, right, Joe and I are leaning in and reading these comments as we're going through. Fantastic comments. Thank you very much. This is why we're here, right? It's to get this collaboration and to make things better. So with that, we'll bring our chat to a close here today. And so first off, I want to thank Dr. DeFeo. Always fantastic having you on and to get this perspective and kind of this big picture of what we're trying to do in quality. Thank you very much for that. And thank you everyone in our audience for participating today. We appreciate the investment of time and activities and thinking about how can we make things better. And that's you, right? We're helping to facilitate that, but you're the people who make things better. So thanks for taking that time and that effort. And with that, we'll bring our chat to a close here for this week. And we'll be back here next Friday at the same time, 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern for the next chat. And I'll bring another fascinating expert on like Dr. DeFeo. And we'll have another chat and we'll get together. So hopefully we'll see you back here next week. And in the meantime, enjoy your weekend. Have a great time. And we'll see you then. Thanks a lot, everybody. Thanks, Joe.
Bye. Thank you. Happy Groundhog's Day.
There you go. Bye, everyone.